This is Rick speaking. Hello and welcome to Champion Individual Rights, where I always focus on the importance of digesting reality in a moral context. Today, we live in a world where U.S. politicians and politicians around the world are behaving as if individual rights do not even exist. What can we do to turn this situation around? We have to begin by digesting reality in a moral context. I created this graphic. It explains Immanuel Kant's perceptions on how we think, and it combines my ideas with digesting reality in a moral context, my perceptions being in orange and Kant's perceptions being in white. Kant explains in his writing that synthesis is the forming process of understanding. Within synthesis, human comprehension has two primary facilities: the sensibility, of which space and time, intuitions, and analytic judgments fall under, and the understanding, of which concepts and synthetic judgments fall under. Kant explains in his writing that thinking is uniting all these representations in our mind in a non-contradictory fashion, which enables us to gain what he calls real experience, to digest reality. It must be recognized that all morality stems from the recognition of individual rights. Thinking is uniting representations with well-defined moral values, which enables us to gain real experience and decipher reality in a moral context. One should have well-defined moral values within their base perceptions, which should be used in helping to make accurate determinations in regards to making morally sound judgments. Now, in digesting reality in a moral context, my personal moral code is derived from the combination of these perceptions. 1. The recognition of individual rights, with the understanding that every individual should have a right to their own life, privacy, and possessions, regardless of their ethnicity or the geography upon which they preside. 2. The recognition of the two common laws that are said to be derived from all of the world's religions. Quote, do all you have agreed to do, and do not encroach on other persons or their property. Unquote. I'd like to add, without their consent. 3. The recognition that the politicians should be bound to the same laws of the conscience that the average individual is bound to. And 4. The recognition that, quote, if the goal be good, the means of obtaining the goal must be good, else the goal becomes corrupted. Unquote. Mahatma Gandhi. Now, what separates human beings from the beast is the moral law. The moral law commands man, telling man what he is worthy of when it comes to his interactions with other rational creatures, including his fellow mankind. Now, a beast cannot comprehend the law. Hence, to a beast, life is but a brute fact. And Immanuel Kant warns in his writings that when human beings separate themselves from the moral law, it is brutality that will follow, which can be witnessed by all of the wars that have taken place throughout mankind's history. Now, how government brainwashing works, it all starts while you're at a young, vulnerable age, before you have developed the ability to decipher that which is true from that which is false, before you have developed the ability to think logically. The force of government moves in and begins programming you with a faulty thought process so that the masses can be easily controlled. Now, I've given it a name, the Cerebrai Vulnerabilis Tempus. That translates in English to cerebral vulnerable period. Going back here, this happens soon between after you're born through your early childhood. And interestingly, the Latin translation of government is mind control. Now, within this defective thought process, individual rights are not even recognized. Perceptions are filled with contradictions. Words have no intrinsic meaning, and there are no well-defined moral values within your base perceptions, which should be used in helping to make accurate determinations in regards to making morally sound judgments. Hence, reality is not deciphered in a moral context. And what props up the entire illusion is the good goal fallacy. Politicians always operate under that illusion that whatever they are doing is for good. Now, during this young, vulnerable period of our existence, what you should have learned, it would be crucial that you receive a sound moral education, with the understanding that every individual should have a right to their own life, regardless of their ethnicity or the geography upon which they preside, enabling an individual to digest reality in a moral context. Also, you should have learned at a young age what I call the baby block rules of understanding. 1. Always look for contradictions to your perceptions. Why? Because thinking is uniting representations. There cannot be any contradictions. A contradiction can only exist in an imaginary world, not the real one. Now, if you're not looking for contradictions to your arguments, this is a clear indication that you are in a state of concept manipulation, leading you into an imaginary world filled with contradictions, an illusionary world where reality is often scoffed at. The second most important rule of understanding is to distinguish between knowing and thinking. When you know something, you can prove its possibility. But when you think something as opposed to knowing it, you can think what you please, providing it's a possible thought and there's no contradictions. It will still leave open the possibility that there's a particular appearance in your mind that you cannot prove is not accurate, an appearance being an idea derived from a perception or a combination of perceptions. So what are the benefits of a sound moral education at a young, vulnerable age? Learning for understanding is freedom. Once an individual understands that they have a right to their own life, they will be far more likely to respect the rights of other people as well. This could go a long ways in lowering crime rates throughout the world, including the crimes against humanity that are being inflicted against citizens around the world by political leaders. So when did this all start? I call it the birth of an illusion. Thousands of years ago, large groups of bandits would terrorize the landscapes. They would rob, they would rape, they would torture, they would murder people. They soon found it more convenient to settle down in one area and claim rule over it, setting geographical boundaries as if they were fences, and proceeded to use the people as if they were cattle. They called themselves governments. Now, as these large groups of bandits spread and seized power throughout the known territories, illusion was bestowed upon the masses, leading to the notion that some men should have the right to rule over other men by brute force. It was through the mechanism of legality that further deception was created, of which placed the politicians above and beyond the laws of the conscience that the average individual was bound to. The end result of this virtuous thought process litters our history books. War after war after war, government against government, sacrificing the lives of people as if they were pawns to be sacrificed on their bloody chessboards. Politicians operate and have for thousands of years under the fallacy that their goals are so high, that their goals are so lofty, that they can do anything that they want in order to achieve them. In reality, the higher your goals are and the more people that they affect, all the more important that the means of obtaining your goals be good. It must be recognized that the politicians should be bound to the same laws of the conscience that the average individual is bound to, and that the moral law applies to all rational creatures necessarily, to all of humanity, and that would just happen to include the political leaders of the world. There are no exceptions. There is no reason to continue following in the errant footsteps of our forefathers. It must be recognized that the moral law applies to all of humanity. It is only through our moral cognition, it is only through our ability to digest reality in a moral context that mankind can achieve its ultimatum, world peace, through the recognition of individual rights on a global basis, with the understanding that every individual, that's every man, every woman, and every child, should have a right to their own life, privacy, and possessions, regardless of their ethnicity or the geography upon which they preside, which currently is the exact opposite position of the morally bankrupt, deep state, New World Order nonsense that is devastating our planet today with massive death, destruction, and suffering. With the threat of nuclear war in the air, now is the time for a peaceful revolution of thought. Thank you very much for considering my words.